Hello, everybody, and welcome to Psychology 2500, the Lifespan Human Development. My name is Dr. Christopher Gotti, and I will be not only the narrator for this class, but also your instructor, grader, and point of contact for all the things that could potentially come up during the course of the semester. You'll notice on this page here that all I have listed on this for my information is my email address. That's because this is kind of an unusual situation for this class. Even though I do technically work for the University of Nebraska at Omaha, I actually am out in California, where I teach most of my classes at the University of California at Berkeley. The online nature of this class allows me to teach you from a very far distance away, but it does prevent me from being able to have in-person office hours. But since this is an online class, I also know that many of you aren't in the city of Omaha either. So if you have questions about things, feel free to either contact me on the class site or reach out to me via that email that you see listed here on that page. I'm pretty good at responding at those emails if questions do arise or if concerns pop up. But I'm hoping that the nature of this class makes it so that you're not going to have a lot of need to contact me and a lot of worries that pop up. But it's definitely something I encourage you to do if those concerns or problems should potentially arise. This first presentation that you're watching here is merely meant to give you kind of a general overview of what to expect from the class, what you need to bring to this class, and how to prepare for each of the different things that are going to be coming up throughout the course of the 16 weeks that you're taking this class. I guess the first thing that's important to note is that even though maybe the bookstore doesn't always have this listed as a requirement for the class, there is definitely a required textbook for the class. And the title of the textbook is called A Topical Approach to Lifespan Development. I'm currently requiring students to get the 6th edition of the book. That could potentially change in future semesters. So make sure that you're always checking the syllabus to know which edition you need to get. The 5th edition also would work fine. They very rarely update it to the point where you would be completely lost if you had an older, slightly older edition than the one that's required. But you're always looking for the topical approach to lifespan development by Sandrock. And please look for that exact one because the chapter arrangements will be really different if you grab a different development book from Stantrock or if you happen to just grab any random lifespan development book. Another thing that's really important for you to note is not only should you be accessing the Canvas site on a regular basis, but if you want to learn more about information in the class, there's a bevy of resources available. One of my favorites is www.learner.org, which is actually linked to the PBS company, and they have tons of documentaries, tons of different learning resources that can really illuminate some of the things that we're covering. One of my favorite areas is, or I guess video series is something called Discovering Psychology, which is a little outdated at this point, but it's got some really neat stuff in it, and it can also link you to a lot of other extra information if you've got something that you've really found interesting and want to find more information on. Another thing that's probably important to note for this class is that even though you can do things somewhat at your own pace for this class, at least you can watch the material at your own-ish pace in each week, I do have, just like any other class, basic grade requirements. So for this class, in addition to these presentations and random stuff that comes up, you will be graded at the end of the class with 3 exams, 12 different write-ups, and I'll kind of detail what those are and what it actually entails a little bit later. And then also you're going to have a chance to make back any points that you lost by a bunch of different what's called forum discussion posts, where you can comment on something that you found interesting with other classmates and kind of have a back and forth with people. So you have somewhat of an interactive nature to this class, like you would if you were taking an in-person class in lifespan development. Let me get into the specifics now of the exams and the write-ups, because I think that's really important to talk about. So the exams, as I mentioned, are going to come in three different parts. They are not cumulative, so don't worry, you're not going to have information from the first presentation on the final exam or the third exam that you're taking. It's just three separate exams covering their own sections. But there are a lot of key requirements to these exams that make them a little bit more difficult than you might think coming into the class. First, there are requirements on what you can do with the exam. So you have to take it alone. You can use a book and notes because honestly, how in the world could I check that? So I'm just going to assume that everybody's using those, therefore just allow them in general. But because you can use books and notes, note that the questions are a little bit more detailed. And very rarely am I going to just ask definition-based questions. You can look those up. And it also means that the questions will relate to presentation material primarily. And that means that even if you did happen to write down all the stuff that's in the presentation slides as you're watching, you won't have the ability to really get every single answer by looking at those as you're going into them. There are only 45 questions, but you do only have 60 minutes to take the exam unless you have some type of accommodation through medical or other reasons that it extends it. But almost everybody's going to have 45 questions and 60 minutes to answer those, which means, again, even if you've got a book and notes, it's not enough time to look up every single question. So you really do have to be prepared for these exams when they come up. And in terms of when they come up, they're going to be set on specific weeks. So you've got 4 weeks of class, then an exam, then another 4 weeks of class and an exam, and then holidays and other stuff. Things can kind of change, but usually another 4 weeks of class and an exam. So just make sure that you're kind of mindful of what's on the docket, what's going on with the schedule, and that way you don't get surprised by any exams, because that's one of the worst things that you can run into. Now, the other big requirement for this class are the write-up assignments, or is the write-up assignments. These are going to be following the end of each presentation block. Usually in each week, we're going to have somewhere between 2 and 3 presentations, but very rarely are we all the way up to 3. It usually adds up to about 2 hours worth of material, and you're going to have a reading chapter assigned for each week as well. Then at the end of this presentation and reading, you're going to need to have some type of a summary write-up that you submit. Now, some of them are supposed to be summative of everything. So you're going to have to cover everything in the presentations and readings from kind of beginning to end in some cohesive summary that's in your own words. No quotes, no covering things in the exact list that's in the presentation. And it does require a lot of work. You'll see the length requirements on the assignment tabs when you open them up. But the nice thing with those is it's a great way to kind of consolidate the information and really use that to springboard you into the exams. In other weeks, you're going to have to kind of focus in on key topics. So you'll maybe on certain weeks have 2 interesting topics in the presentation and 2 things from the book that you need to really dive into deeply. And again, the length of them is covered, or length requirements for them is covered in each of the individual assignments. The last thing that you're going to need for these is to kind of respond to a very topic-specific question. Now, all of these are due at exactly 10 p.m. at the end of each weekly session. And if you procrastinate on these, which is usually the main reason why people lose points, you won't get any points if you're turning it in past 10 p.m. Actually, technically, you'll have the chance to turn in too late for half credit, but that's a huge hit. So don't go past the 10 p.m. deadline, and try your best not to go up to that 10 p.m. deadline. I've had a bevy of students over the years wait until the last second to watch the presentations, skim through them, or just skim through the book real quickly, and then think they've written a very coherent, full summary, and it's very telling to the instructor that these people are rushing it. Watch the whole video, or all of the videos in full, read the whole chapter, and put a good effort into these summaries. And not only will you probably get the full 15 points for these, but I promise when it comes to the exams, doing that in that manner, not procrastinating on this and really putting a ton of effort in this, will pay off. Well, it'll pay dividends in each exam when you don't have to study as much and you still will get a very darn good grade on the exams. So that's the other big part of the class. There's also the discussion forums, as I mentioned, that are a separate thing. Those, if you continue posting 1 or 2 discussion posts each week, we'll get extra credit points, but this is the main thrust of your grade outside of the exams for this class. As I mentioned earlier, don't procrastinate. If you miss an exam, you don't get a chance to retake it. If you miss a post, you can technically turn in too late, but you only get half credit on those, and that's going to really be detrimental to your grade. Forum posts can never be done late since they are just extra credit. There's also no resubmitting things. So if you kind of half butt it on a specific assignment and don't get a full thing in, you don't get to redo certain parts of it later on. You'll get the grade that you get, and then you kind of have to move on. So as I mentioned, for these online classes, the biggest hurdle for students is usually not finding a way to get the information. It's usually just as informative as a typical class. It's not usually struggling on exams because they're so much more difficult to understand, or even technology issues. It's for most students in their online classes, the challenge is just kind of monitoring their time, making sure that they keep up with things and not skipping stuff, just like you wouldn't skip stuff in a typical class. If you do that, you should be fine, but you really need to stress, that's why I have a whole separate slide on this, the importance of not procrastinating in this class, or really any online class that you're taking. For those of you that really want to see kind of how your grade breaks down, as I mentioned before, you get 3 exams. Each of them are worth 60 points. They add up to a little over 15% of your grade each individually. And then the write-ups, actually, because of how many we have, since they're all 15 points apiece, add up to, in total, half of your grade. So half of your grade is exams, half of your grade is write-ups, and you can make up a decent amount of points, almost about 3 or 4% of your grade, by continually doing those forum posts, and that can really be a big payoff at the end of the semester. In terms of grades, I just operate on the standard 100% scale. If you're in the 90% range, you're going to get some type of A, B's in the 80s, C's in the 70s, D's in the 60s, and F's in the 60, below 60. Pluses and minuses will be kind of added when appropriate. I know there's certain letters that they don't work perfectly for, but if you can get a plus, it'll be anything in the 7 pluses, so 87 to 89.9% would get you a B plus. Then I guess the minuses are the 0s to 3s, so 80% to 82.9% would get you a B in the class, and that works for all of the other letters that are listed. And there is no kind of pleading at the end of the semester, no bumps at the end of the semester, but also I promise there will be nothing punitive at the end of the semester. So if I didn't like something you said to me, it's not like you get 72% and I'd still give you a D in the class, or 88% and I'd somehow drop you down to a B minus. I'm just going straight off of the amount of points that you earned to determine your grade for the class. All right, that covers kind of the main general stuff for this class. I do want to get into the specifics, though, of what lifespan development's all about and how we're going to approach the material in the class. So let's take a quick break, and then when we come back, we'll get into what lifespan development's all about. See you soon.